Risk is our business.
The first duty of every Starfleet officer is to the truth.
But if we turn our backs on our principles, we stop being human.
Did you ever do anything you thought was unethical?
I think I can live with it.
Hey, it's Janeway, and welcome back to another Star Trek video. So last week, I did a Trek analysis video about the DS9 episode In the Pale Moonlight, which you should definitely check out. It ended up being longer than my usual Trek analysis videos, and I could probably do a whole series dissecting that episode, because holy crap, Garrick, how deep was this plan? But in my video, I made this particular claim. I think out of the main Star Trek captains, only Sisko could have pulled this episode off. I mean, with episodes like For the Uniform, where Sisko poisons an entire planet just to get Eddington to turn himself over to the authorities.
You betrayed your uniform!
And you're betraying yours!
Not to mention the general wheeling and dealing he does with Quark throughout the show, how he replaced a historical figure and took part in a hostage situation, and even that he could pass as his own mirror universe double. Yeah, Sisko definitely has a history of doing some shady stuff, and even though he does have his misgivings, it's believable that he's capable of deceiving the Romulans into the war.
I lied. I cheated. I bribed men to cover the crimes of other men.
But going through my comments, I ran into some counter arguments from people saying, no, other Star Trek captains could have done what Sisko did. And you know what? This is the subject for another video, so here it is, because this is worth talking about. Although 2 videos in a row talking about the same episode, am I entering my In the Pale Moonlight era? Who knows? But either way, it's an interesting topic to explore because we do see a fair amount of Captains Kirk, Picard, Janeway, and Archer in their shows over multiple seasons and how they handle situations differently. So here is my take on the different Star Trek captains from the original series through Enterprise, and whether they would have done anything remotely close to what Sisko did in the Pale Moonlight. Bear in mind, of course, this is just my opinion, and I welcome discussion in the comments section, whether agreeing with me or disagreeing with me. I want to hear what you have to say.
I think you're all wrong.
How's that?
Let's start with Captain Kirk, the one who started it all and the one closest to Gene Roddenberry's vision for Star Trek. Now, right away, Captain Kirk does share some characteristics with Sisko. He's a risk taker, he doesn't believe in the no-win scenario, and he's willing to break the Prime Directive for a good reason. He's also not afraid to change the rules of the game for the greater good, and we've seen him thumb his nose at authority multiple times throughout the show. Heck, he's even willing to disregard orders to save his friend's life. Multiple times. Even bring him back from the dead. Because while Kirk is bound by Starfleet regulations, he still has a moral code and a conscience that prevents him from blindly following orders or really going off the wall. Well, no more than usual. Now, we have seen Kirk go on a covert mission into Romulan space in the Enterprise incident, putting on an act in order to steal a cloaking device from the Romulans. Though those ears had to go.
Somehow, they do not look aesthetically agreeable on humans.
So he is willing to deceive the Romulans, but would he have been willing to falsify proof of Dominion treachery in order to convince the Romulans to enter the war under false pretenses? Probably not, if only because he's so connected to Gene Roddenberry's vision of Star Trek. It's in the character DNA. Sure, we've seen him supply arms to even up the odds in a war on a pre-war planet between 2 terrible Whig factions, but he still tends to do everything out in the open. And even in the Enterprise incident, stealing a cloaking device is way different than conning the entire Romulan Empire into a war. That's not to say that there wouldn't have been someone in the Federation, even Gene Roddenberry's Federation, that would have tried a full-out deception. After all, Star Trek VI exists. But I don't think Kirk would have been the one to do it. Otherwise, with his grievances against the Klingons, he probably would have allowed the peace talks to fail.
You've restored my father's faith.
And you've restored my son's.
But after Captain Kirk is the next Roddenberry Captain creation, Captain Picard. Now, I can see Kirk maybe being more ambiguous depending on how you want to look at the character, but Picard definitely isn't. There's no way he would have done anything remotely close to what Sisko did to bring the Romulans into the war. Or if he did, it would be very out of character because it would violate two major components of who the character is. One of those reasons is his strong sense of morality. One of the reasons why I like the character so much. He has a very keen sense of right and wrong and is willing to put his career on the line for his principles. An admiral wants to take Data's daughter away? Not while he's his captain.
Order a man to hand this child over to the state. Not while I'm his captain.
Another admiral tries to strong-arm Ensign Ro into stirring up between the Cardassians and Bajorans? Here, let's go expose him. Retired Admiral Gene Simmons? The actress, not the rocker. Hounds a kid who fudged his family history on his Starfleet application? He's about to ruin that woman's whole career.
I've brought down bigger men than you, Picard.
Heck, he's probably one of the few Starfleet captains that actually takes the Prime Directive seriously, even to a fault.
Prime Directive is not just a set of rules. It is a philosophy.
Well, it's your prime directive, not mine.
The lead up to the plan of bringing the Romulans into the war in DS9. Blackmail, bribery, even getting involved with Garrick, who took care of a couple of people, if you know what I mean. They're all antithetical to Picard's sense of morality. The other reason is Picard's duty to the truth. You all remember this speech, right?
The first duty of every Starfleet officer is to the truth.
I mean, he came down hard on Wesley for covering up the death of one cadet. Would he willingly have on his conscience going through with a plan that killed at least 2 people in order to convince the Romulans, an entire civilization, into a war resulting in even more deaths based on a lie? Absolutely not.
I'm a role model.
I'm sure you are.
Not to mention, he would have to be working with Garrick.
Truth, Doctor, is in the eye of the beholder. I never tell the truth because I don't believe there is such a thing.
Although a Picard-Garrick adventure would be a sight to behold.
Earl Grey?
I'd like to get my hands on that fellow Earl Grey and tell him a thing or two about tea leaves.
The closest Picard ever came anywhere near to a Romulan deception was in the Season 7 episode The Pegasus. And he wasn't the one putting it on. In fact, he blew the whole thing wide open! He straight up told the Romulans that Riker's former captain did indeed develop a very illegal cloaking device that went directly against a treaty that kept the peace with the Romulans for the past 60 years. Picard was always more of a man of peace and diplomacy.
Why didn't you board it as Maxwell requested?
I was here to protect the peace.
So, no, Picard definitely wouldn't have done what Sisko did. He stands with his principles above all else.
To use him in this manner, we be no better than the enemy that we seek to destroy.
Janeway, on the other hand, well, actually, Captain Janeway is where this discussion gets interesting, and she's probably the most cited for, of course she would have done it.
When diplomacy fails, there's only one alternative: violence.
One of the things that impresses me with Janeway is how devoted she is to her crew and how she's willing to bend some of the rules for their survival. I mean, stranded out in the Delta Quadrant, you gotta. She's done some pretty crazy feats for her crew. Crashing Voyager to reset the timeline, punching giant viruses, straight up time traveling. She'll do almost anything to protect her crew. And I do mean anything.
Doesn't anyone see that this is wrong?
But would she have orchestrated an entire deception to bring the Romulans into the war? I would argue no. Janeway's capable of a lot, but for the most part, she just wants to get her crew home. And if she can do that quietly, she will. If she does fight, it's mostly because there's a direct threat to her crew. Even if her actions domino into larger consequences across the quadrant, her intention isn't to play 4D chess to ensure the safety of her crew. She prefers to deal with adversaries far more directly. And yes, as many Tuvix jokes as there are out there, Janeway does have a conscience. She wasn't willing to leave the Ocampa to the Kazon, even if it meant stranding Voyager. She was disgusted at how the Equinox was surviving in the Delta Quadrant.
But if we turn our backs on our principles, we stop being human.
Heck, she was offended at a fictional version of herself, doing a little too vixing. While Janeway might go to some great lengths for her crew, I just can't see her ever going that far, being a willing participant in that large of a deception. Now, when it comes to Captain Archer, he's probably the only Star Trek captain I can see doing anything remotely close to Sisko's actions in the Pale Moonlight. But with a few caveats. Seasons 1 and 2 Archer, probably not. He's a pretty laid-back guy, provided you don't piss him off too much. He's a true explorer at heart with a wide-eyed curiosity. And he's even a little naive at times, often looking before he leaps. Oh sure, we'll repair your ship, stop by for a meal, and even do a little shirtless across. What do you mean this is a hostage situation? If anything, early Archer would have been the one tricked into the war with the Dominion. However, the Xindi arc in Season 3 changes things, and we see Archer do some pretty shady stealing a warp coil and stranding totally not Damar 3 years from home, throwing people in the airlock. Heck, he even tried to convince Degra that they were cellmates 3 years into the future and just escaped prison. All to find the location of a mega weapon under construction. There are some similarities between what Archer and Sisko did, and in both cases, it was all for survival. That being said though, Archer and the Enterprise crew's lives were under constant attack with no backup, so in his desperate situation, he was willing to do stuff he probably wouldn't have otherwise. Sisko's decision, on the other hand, comes across more as administrative. People around him are losing loved ones, but they're all okay and not stuck in the middle of nowhere without backup. While Archer might get close to what Sisko was capable of, it arguably took him a lot more to get him to that point. So in the end, I would say that my original claim mostly stands. Out of the 5 original Star Trek captains, Sisko was the most believable for In the Pale Moonlight. However, Captain Archer, under enough pressure, could get close to it. But what do you all think? Do you agree with my original statement that only Sisko was capable of the plan to bring the Romulans into the war as shown in the Pale Moonlight? Or do you think the other captains would have pulled it off as well? And what would those episodes with the other captains look like? Please, leave comments below and discuss. As always, thanks for tuning in to another Star Trek video. If you like what you see, why not give my video a like and subscribe to my channel? Tell your friends. Until next time.
Erase that entire personal log.